Welcome to Wielding Legacy. My name is Laura Payne-Stanley. This podcast is for high achievers, visionaries, creatives, coaches, and consultants. Because the key to unlocking your future lies in legacies. You see, I know you are here creating an impact in your industry. You are here building a legacy for you and your family. And it drives you and it occupies your mind. But through my work as a trusted advisor to extraordinary entrepreneurs, I know you aren't yet reaching your greatest potential in business, your performance, and potentially in relationships. I'm known with my clients for being their loudest cheerleader. I often believe in them even before they do so themselves, and yet you can't enroll me in your legacy limiting story. I'm your biggest empowering challenger as you create your ultimate legacy. This podcast is called Wielding Legacy, because the key to unlocking your future lies in legacies. Welcome, friends, to today's Wielding Legacy episode. And I'm welcoming a rebel, an anarchist, and someone who has achieved so much in her life. She's success coach and creative, Steph Zakas.
I think the connecting intuition to courage is trust. I think it would be a line of trust within yourself and to trust yourself. So I don't really talk about it a lot, but when I was in that really abusive relationship and I was literally like a prisoner for years, the feeling that I had in order to get out was very much this gut feeling of like, you're meant for more. And that is what got me out of the situation.
In this episode, we discuss, how does one actually trust their gut instinct? How do you use the internal power that you have already inside you to create your legacy? Come and find out in today's episode. So welcome to the podcast, Steph. I am so delighted to have you here today, and I think it's going to be a very interesting conversation.
Definitely.
Okay, I want to jump straight in.
Yeah.
With a topic that I know is a little probably a bit uncomfortable. Okay, and that's okay, isn't it? Is what does legacy mean to you?
Yeah. It's loaded.
What do you mean it's loaded? Tell us more.
Well, legacy, it's like it's a big word and it means big things, right? Like a legacy. I don't know. I feel like it's loaded. It's like similar to when someone asks you, like, what's your purpose in your life? And you're kind of like, my purpose. I don't know. I don't know. It has that like weighted feeling. So yeah, it's big.
I think that's an interesting point, because many guests have said when they come to talking about legacy that they've never really considered their legacy before. And they've definitely not considered necessarily the word legacy or what they want their legacy to be. Do you think that's fair to say for you too?
Yes and no. I mean, I think about legacy, if you want to call it that. I don't know if I've necessarily like called it legacy, but I definitely have thought about like, what is my stamp in the world? What is it that I want to bring to the world? What do I want to help people with in the world? And I feel like that is a legacy, because for me, a legacy is when you're, dead and gone. How do people remember you? What have you contributed? Right. And like, also being somebody that is child free and will always be child free, and I will never have children other than my princess cat. After me and I'm dead, that's kind of it, right? I don't have children, to like keep on with the legacy or take over my business, when it's done. So it is something that I think about in those terms quite a bit, I think. Yeah.
Okay. So I mentioned in your intro that you are an American, but you're an expat and you're a resident now of Iceland.
Yeah.
Now, for many people, can you just kind of share how? I mean, for many people, just hearing that story is, okay, how does a US citizen become a resident and then a citizen of Iceland? Because probably many people see Iceland as one of those places that they would love to go to. They like go on holiday or vacation, and they would love to become a resident. But it seems such a big thing to do. So take us back, Steph. How did little Steph, whatever age that was, how did little Steph go from where she was to living in Iceland, being a resident?
Yeah, so I feel like I've kind of always been on the trajectory, even since high school. So I grew up in a really small suburb of Columbus, Ohio. Ohio is a relatively small state in the United States, and I always knew I wanted to get out. Like, there was never a point in my life that I ever even thought about like going to college in that city, even though it has one of the arguably best colleges in the United States and one of the oldest ones. It's huge. My entire family has gone there for generations. And I always knew I didn't want to do it. I always knew I wanted to get out. So I think I've always been in that mindset of what else. I've never liked the stagnation of just, I don't know, just sitting in one spot. But so I think it started then, but I actually was living in Brooklyn. I moved to New York after living in a stint in Orlando, where I ended up going to college and getting out of Ohio. But I moved to Brooklyn and I was there working. That's where I literally moved there to like get my ass kicked because I was like, you know, that saying, like, if you can make it there, you can make it anywhere. Mm-hmm. And so I was in Orlando, I was working for Disney, and I was just like, I felt like I was in such a little box, and like being out of a box is very similar to the feeling of like moving to Iceland. It's like, it's a very similar feeling for me. So anyway, my manager said that I was too creative as a photographer at Disney, and I needed to tone down my creativity. So I was like, all right. So within like 3 days, I think it was under a week, I bought a one-way ticket to Brooklyn, and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna move to New York. I don't have a house. I don't have anything. I'm gonna get my ass kicked, and I'm gonna make it happen. So anyway, I was in New York, and I was working in my business, and you know, growing that and everything. And my high school best friend from Ohio messaged me and said her and her sister were going to Iceland, and did I want to join? And me being the nerd that I am, I'd always wanted to go to Iceland because Lord of the Rings is like loosely based on Icelandic folklore. I've seen in like National Geographic, like images of Iceland, and it just seemed so magical. And so I was like, yes, I'm going to go. And so when I was here for the first time, I ended up getting 2 jobs for Brooklyn Magazine. They sent me out to, because I'm also a writer, so they had me do 2 pieces on Icelandic food culture for them. So I photographed and wrote for this magazine. So anyway, I set it up that my first full day in Iceland was the first day that I was going to go out to one of the restaurants that I was covering, which it was about 45 minutes outside of Reykjavik, the like big city here. Big, quote unquote big. It's like the size of like one like New York neighborhood. But so on my way out, I was like driving over this hill, and the sun just like hit me. And then I just saw like the vastness and this feeling of like not being stuck anymore, and like just this openness and like this peace. And so I just fell in love literally instantly. And I started crying, and I was like, I will live here. And it took me like 5 years to make it happen. But I did make it happen. And now I live here. And I would consider this part of my like ideal legacy of my life. So yeah. So anyway, I got here on an artist visa. I'm here as a special artist. I had to prove to the government that I was worth it. So I had to like give them with my application every magazine I've ever been published in, every magazine I've ever helped on production with, because in New York, I helped with like Vanity Fair, GQ, Paramount Pictures, like all those big studios I helped with, all of the lanyards that I shot from like New York Fashion Week. I had to have celebrities that I shot because I do like album covers for people. They signed letters like recommending me. I had to get Icelanders that I had made connections with to write letters on my behalf saying that I'm a special artist and like I'm needed in this society and this whole thing. So I ended up coming here on this like special artist visa. And so ta-da, so now I'm here.
So let me take you
long-winded.
Let me take you back to that moment on the hill when you came over and you saw the light and you had a feeling. For any listeners or any of you watching on YouTube right now, you had to have so much trust and faith in yourself to even get to Iceland, to have that point of realization. Because what I'm hearing sometimes in the wider community of coaching, and when people talk about vision boards and people talk about creating a legacy, is having that actually in a quote unquote aha moment. However, if you hadn't taken action, you couldn't have had the aha moment because you weren't in the place to have the aha moment. So how, winding the clock back, how did you take action when you didn't have like your Northern Star? You didn't really know that, the final plan. Because once you had the aha moment, you had your destination of what you wanted to do. But winding before you'd had that, how did you know what to do? How did you know how to go to Iceland with your friends? Tell us about that process.
Well, I don't know if there's much to talk about. I've always been a risk taker, and I've always just kind of like followed my whims and my impulses. And I've never been afraid of being by myself. I love being by myself. I'm very much an introvert, and I've always done things on my own. So it's never bothered me. And I've never been afraid to travel on my own. I've never been afraid. Even when I moved to Orlando, I moved on my own. Nobody moved with me. Nobody helped me. I went to school on my own. I paid for that myself. Like, I came to Brooklyn on my own. Granted, I did have a friend that helped me out once I got there, which was really great. But I've always just been like, this is what I want to do. I'm going to try it. And so I did. So I don't know. I don't know if there's like much to talk about. I've just always been like that, because my perception on this is like, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Like, it's fine. It's not the end of the world. So
it's interesting what you're telling me, because I hear this from high achievers, that when I ask people to process stuff they don't know, it's very much intuition stroke, let's take a risk, let's try it. And even if you don't know the plan, that actually you did make things happen. Although you may not be able to process out for somebody like you, Steph, who I know from you working with me, that actually you love process. We love understanding mechanics of things. Yeah. And actually not being able to process it as a high achiever can almost be troubling sometimes, because you can't answer me of what was the process. Yeah. Well, see, I think I got the feeling, but you're absolutely right. Once I had the feeling, then I made the plan. Right. So yeah, I guess you're right. I did make a plan. I did sort out, how do I get there? What does it need to take? What do I have that could potentially work, and all of that, and I did come here all the time, like before I got that, which, did help. So yeah, you're right. I did make a process, but I do feel like if I have like that strong, gut feeling, I'm like, fuck it. I'm going to do it. I'll figure out a way, like I'll figure out like my steps. And yeah, I do think, actually, winding it back a little bit, I think a lot of this actually does stem from, this, I don't really talk about it a lot, but when I was in that really abusive relationship, and I was literally like a prisoner for years, the feeling that I had in order to get out was very much this gut feeling of like, you're meant for more. And that is what got me out of the situation. And so it's that very similar gut feeling. Like, if I feel that when I am doing anything, I go for it. Like, I figure out that the plan, and then I go. So it was a very similar, like, this is what you're meant for, like that kind of thing. So it's a very similar, like, gut feeling and that. So yeah, I haven't really thought about that. Well, there's two things to kind of really pick up on here. One is, for any listener right now, or for anyone watching us on YouTube who's resonating, that you might not be in a desirable relationship. It might not be abuse, but actually it might just not be a desirable relationship as well. If you have an internal feeling that actually that is not where you're supposed to be, or actually probably even just listening to this, there's something resonating in you right now that you need to either get out of that relationship or move on. I feel like I need to have a disclaimer right now, because as a master coach, I can't not. No, this is important work, but there are places and safe spaces. Yeah. And if you've had that twinge, that gut feeling, something in you just kind of sparked right now, then do either reach out to someone for assistance. So it's really important to kind of realize that's the first thing I want to say. Yeah, definitely. The second thing is, from adversity, then you contacted your gut feeling, your intuition is another label that we have for it.
Yeah.
At a time in your life necessary when you may not have been able to, in a place or a space again, to be able to say, this is woo-woo, this is my intuition. It was that kind of gut primal feeling of this is not what I'm here for.
Yeah, that exactly. I was like, this isn't the end. Like you have more, like there's more that you're meant like to be doing. Very similar with how I got here. I was like, there's more, and it's in Iceland. What it is, I don't know. You'll figure it out. So
and I've heard this from other legacy builders that actually from trauma can come triumph. That actually those things that we would never have chosen can be used in a way to facilitate where we want to go as we build our legacy.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So talking about intuition now, and I want to say this again to any listeners, anyone watching on YouTube, that there's so many labels for what we call this feeling. It is called gut intuition. And so if you've ever said I had a gut feeling, that's it. Some people call it intuition. Some people call it internal voices. There's a lot of different language around it. Normally, I have what I call in the LPS world the woo-woo meter. Some people are really woo-woo, and like, you know, we have spirit guides and we have a lot of different things, and other people aren't. So actually, it is butterflies in the stomach or it's gut intuition. Yeah. Listeners, don't get tied up about what you call it. The label of it is completely irrelevant. It's the sensation and it's the feeling. Yeah. And this is what I was saying to another guest recently. It's not just about hearing your intuition or hearing that gut feeling, but it's about taking action. Yeah, definitely. Which sounds like, and I know from obviously, I know you very well, that actually you are a good action taker. Right? What I want to ask you next, and these might land very well, they might land very challenging for knowing you. Here we go. We're going in. You are one of the most courageous people I know. Ooh, thanks. Okay. By the way, if you're watching on YouTube, that was a classic Steph avoidance. Using a little bit of humor there too, like, I feel a bit uncomfortable. Let me just kind of just hover over and use humor to compliment. So again, compliments. What we do. And if you, again, go and listen to the episode with the West, James and Kelly West. I talked to James about this again, about how to take the energy of a compliment. And we take the energy of a compliment by not using humor, by taking it straight on. So I'm not gonna say it to you, Steph. Again, Steph, don't worry, Steph works with me enough to know these. But my point is, you are one of the most courageous people I know. Thanks. From your story. Love it that you took it that time. Okay. For anybody listening who knows that there's something going on in their life or their business, and that could be even as you want to raise your rates, or you want to close a part of your business down, or you want to start up a new revenue stream, or you want to leave your corporate job, or whatever you want to do. How do you connect with that intuition? And then how do you connect with your courage to take action? What would your advice be, Steph?
I think the connecting intuition to courage is trust. I think it would be a line of trust within yourself and to trust yourself. This is actually something that with my own coaching clients, it's like a common theme with a lot of the stuff that we try to do is it's trust, right? You have to trust that you will be fine. You have to trust that whatever it is that you're feeling is what you want to do, and also what is the best for you. And also trust that to have the courage that even if it's not the best, you'll still learn from it and it'll still be a part of your path, right? And so that's been something that sometimes I don't even it doesn't even come up with me at all. And I'm just like, F it, let's go. But then sometimes I do have that where I have to kind of talk myself into trusting myself in order to do the thing, right? And that if it doesn't work, it's okay. I will be okay because I trust that I will be okay. I won't let myself fail. I've never let myself down. It's fine. So I think it's trust is really the connection between courage and intuition.
I love that. And I love that as a link for people to really understand between intuition and courage is trust. And here's something I'm going to say as a master coach also that comes up that can be sometimes when we don't trust ourselves is because we're in that fixed mindset. And also because the egos come up, and the egos come up and they go, what happens if no one signs up? What happens if I raise my rates and no one buys? What happens if I launch this new revenue stream and nothing happens with it? What happens if I close my business down and someone then launches something similar to what I did?
Yeah.
Those things can be ego rather than actually are. I mean, again, I'm watching my language here because I know some people have different language and they're not going to resonate with it, whether it's your spirit guides, whether you consider you're building your legacy. But actually, if you come back to legacy and you know what you're looking to build, then it's easier to quiet the ego. And I'm going to say this right now. Sometimes I hear that ego is bad. It's not. The ego is there to keep you safe. That literally is the primary directive of the ego. So we need ego. Yeah. But actually, if the ego is too loud and it's drowning out your intuition, and it's drowning out the trust that Steph just told you about, and it's drowning out the courage because it's just too loud for you, then, dear listeners, really think, actually, who is talking here? Your intuition or your ego? And is the ego trying to keep you safe, or is it trying to keep you stuck?
Yeah,
big
for sure.
Yeah. Okay. So let's come back to your legacy that you're building, Steph, as conscious childless person. And again, when we talk about childless, it's sometimes these areas that people like don't want to talk about. I'm childless by choice. I'm childless by choice. And again, we're different angles from the same kind of point right now. Yeah. But these conversations should happen. And so many times people don't want to say, I'm childless by choice.
Yeah.
As part of your legacy creation. Yeah. Can I ask you to share, has anyone ever challenged your decision to be childless by choice?
Yeah, I mean, I get the whole like, well, when I was younger, because I've always known, like, this has never been a thing where I've had any kind of like internal, maybe I will, maybe I won't, whatever. I've known since I was a teenager that it doesn't excite me, and it's not something that makes sense in my life. So when I was younger and I would talk about it, especially back then, because it was like the late 90s, like early 2000s. And it was like, I would say more taboo than it is now. And so if I were to talk about it, it was first, a lot of people would kind of be shocked that like I would even be talking about it. And then they would be like, oh, well, she's young. So they would challenge me in that way and say, oh, when you're older, you'll want kids. Or I get this challenge of like, well, who's going to do like your dishes and your house chores for you? And I'm like, is that why you have kids? Like, that seems like not a reason to have children, but okay, I'll just do my own dishes. So I get challenged in that way also. And then I also get a lot of people that are like, well, what happens when you're older? Like, who's going to take care of you when you're older? And I'm like, I'm just going to be a multimillionaire, and I'm just going to have like a really awesome like retirement home, and a professional can take care of me. I don't know, so I get challenged in those ways a lot. Now that I'm a little older, I'm 38 now. Most people still think I'm in my like early 30s though. So I get challenged sometimes, but I'm kind of like past that point where they're like, well, when you're older. But I do get people that challenge me of once I get through these like, last like childbearing years and I can no longer have kids, I'm going to regret it. And I'm like, no, I'm not. So I get challenged in those ways. And I also think too, like I get challenged from a place of, how do I use this? How do I say these words? I feel like sometimes I get challenged from people that do have kids that maybe regret having kids. And I feel like sometimes I get a projection onto me because they kind of regret their decision. And so they like, I don't know, are just like projecting it on me and to kind of like give themselves like permission and acceptance that they did have kids. I don't know how to explain it, but sometimes I can tell. I'm like, I think what you're saying is really just what like you wish you could have told yourself or something like, a few years ago. So yeah, I get challenged in that way a bit, but I don't really care. Like, I'm like,
no. And it's always an interesting one because I feel like childless by choice, childless not by choice, or childless.
Yeah.
Actually, sometimes these conversations become so easily, mistaken for what someone's saying
or they become uncomfortable or difficult.
Mm-hmm.
People are worried about being PC with their language. They don't ask questions. They don't know. And it's one of those things I personally think when we come to legacy, we can't not talk about children, having children, not having children, because or nieces, nephews, anything in between when it comes to being legacy, because for many, legacy is, you started when I said, what is legacy? And you said about not having children. So for so many people, legacy becomes synonymous with children, rightly or wrongly. And I don't necessarily normally say right or wrong, but there's a whole shade of what legacy means.
Absolutely.
But one of the lessons I'd like to say to someone when you talk about legacy is don't project your legacy desire onto somebody else. So don't project legacy to you means children, but to somebody else it means children. And you've got two women here, by choice, by not choice, who have children. You never know where someone is on their journey.
Yeah,
and so imagine now that you'd asked about that. You could be having me on a feisty day about not having children. You could be having you on a feisty day. You never know someone's story.
Exactly.
And I'm going to say this to all listeners. And again, if you're watching on YouTube, ask permission. I'm a permission-based coach. Steph is a permission-based coach, right? Say to someone, do you mind if I ask a question about your choice not to have kids?
Yeah.
Because then someone can say, not now, ask me another time, whatever else, just don't do it. But as soon as you ask someone without permission, it can feel like an attack. Why don't you want kids? And you can be like, I didn't know I was here for this. I was just having a conversation about legacy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
definitely.
That's just a piece of advice for anybody. Again, kids, non-kids, people. It's just ask permission when you ask some of these questions.
Yeah.
Now, I necessarily didn't ask permission with Steph because we were having a podcast interview today, and I know Steph very well. Slightly different kind of tonality to it. So when you're going and thinking about your legacy going forward, Steph, what comes up for you? Do you have an idea what your legacy you are looking to create is?
The only thing I really land on is just like, how can I help other people succeed? Like, that's just, it doesn't really matter what modality it is, right? Like, I obviously I'm a coach and I help people, with their businesses, and I help people, with personal development. But like, I feel like even if I wasn't doing that, I would still land on like helping people in some way, like be their most like greatest version of themselves that they want, right? Not like the best version of somebody else's standards, but like, just, I don't know. I always come back to how can I help others be what they want to be, like however that modality is. So I think that's really my legacy. Is I always think about like, how do I make other people feel? When have I like helped them, whether it's, advocating for them or, cause I also have ADHD, right? So I get a lot of clients that also have ADHD. And so just like seeing them have this relief that like, you're not broken. You can totally like make your life how you want it around your own terms, and seeing that like, right. So now they can just like live their life how they want. Like that feeling, I don't know. I feel like that's my legacy. I just try to help people feel confident and accepted and just like do what they want. So that's only thing.
Am I okay to ask a follow-up about your ADHD?
Totally. Yeah. Anything.
So I know obviously you've had ADHD since you were a kid.
Yeah. So I was diagnosed at 9.
Yeah. You were diagnosed at 9. So this isn't a new diagnosis. This is a long established diagnosis. Yeah. Medications you've tried before, and different kind of modalities, and using your own language of how to deal with ADHD, till you actually got to a place where Steph deals with Steph's ADHD and uses it actually as a superpower rather than essence to manage it, because that's sometimes you hear that language, to manage ADHD rather than to actually kind of use it internally as a force. Okay.
Yeah, definitely. But also not even that, but more just like accepting that this is just how you are. Because I feel like a lot of times when people talk about the managing of ADHD, they're comparing it to like a neurotypical life or standards or brain. So they're trying to like manage how they operate to be acceptable within a neurotypical world. And I'm like, but why? You don't need to necessarily manage it, just work with it, like, I don't know. I don't know. I feel like that's been my that's really been how I've just like found the success with it. I don't necessarily think of it as a superpower necessarily, other than I think it gives me some added skills, but I don't see it as this, like, I do see a lot of language around ADHD being a superpower and stuff like that, which it could be for some people. It's just me. Like, I don't see it as this, like, anything. Like, on the days that I can hyper focus and I want to hyper focus on something and I'm like learning something, because that is one of my skill sets, I'm like what did my client say? Swiss Army knife of like knowledge, right? I like to think of it as like a Mary Poppins bag, right? Like, I have all this knowledge, and like, if I need something, I can open up my ADHD bag and be like, what is this random fact that I've read on like some rabbit hole, right? So like, I think it helps me, but I don't try to manage it. I don't try to like create my productivity life to fit within a corporate world or a neurotypical world or anything like that. I just, what do I want to do? And I do it. So I don't really try to manage it. I do try to set some parameters for myself so I can keep my like scaffolding, right? Like my goalposts. But I always say it's like scaffolding within your life. However, it's built to like withstand earthquakes, right? So it's still flexible. Right. So when I do have weeks, you've been working with me for years. I'll have weeks where I'm like, I laid on the couch for 4 days straight because like, that's just what my mind and body needed. But I'm okay with that because I know after that period, I will come up with something amazing. Like,
when you're hyper focused, there's again, and what we're talking about here for anybody else, and it doesn't matter. And I personally, sometimes I think labels can actually be the worst things that we give people because people fit in a box. So whether a diagnosis is ADHD, ADD, whether we have other diagnoses, or don't diagnose, I'm not sure actually the proper term. Somebody can actually email me in and tell me. What can happen is our personality can go to the parameters of the label that we've been given, rather than saying, Steph, you're an amazing whole person. A facet of you is that you have ADHD. And actually what you're saying is that because the word manage to me means that something's wrong.
Exactly.
It's something's less than, therefore, how do we make it manageable into the norm?
Yeah.
And that's where I sometimes think the language goes a little bit wrong, because it's actually a case of this is just a facet of your personality, and how do you work with that facet?
Yeah, you operate differently.
In a way. Yeah, absolutely. That some people are morning people. By the way, hello, if you've never met me before, my name's Laura Payne-Stanley, and I'm an obscene morning person. I am the chirpy person in the morning that you're like, would you please shut up? Because I'm up and I'm like, let's go, and everyone else is like, really no. So Steph, what are your non-negotiables when it comes to you to creating a legacy life?
Oh, yeah. So my non-negotiables are being held down, being somebody else determining what I will and won't do, not being able to have, I think my biggest theme is freedom. Like, any of these things all boil down to freedom for me to be able to do what I want, earn the money that I want, travel when I want, do all the things that I want. So like, that's my one non-negotiable when it comes to this and creating my legacy, is having the freedom, and like the freedom to create and to think and like come up with all the ideas that I come up with and all those things. Because in the end, those are the things that I give, I give to the world, or is like all of that stuff. So if I didn't have the freedom to do that stuff, if somebody was telling me where to live, what to do, how I should operate my business, that I should actually be back in corporate America, whatever it might be, I wouldn't be my whole ass self, right? I would be like a small version of Steph shoved in a box and like looking out the window in Midtown Manhattan that I remember distinctly, wanting to jump out of the window, not really, the publisher's office, just like, I'm not free. So my biggest thing with my legacy is the freedom to create it and like give back how I can to help people. And that's really
beautiful.
It.
What an insight to share with everyone when it comes to legacy creation for you. Freedom is the core of everything that you do.
Yes.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for being on the podcast today,
Thanks,
Steph.
Laura.
It has been said that with a big enough lever, you can move the world. I've spent my life figuring out how to use that lever to move my own world. And in doing so, I help extraordinary entrepreneurs do exactly the same for themselves. So I want to offer you a perspective on what gives you the greatest leverage in your life to create wealth, health, and happiness. It's called legacy. And the lever to your legacy is within your reach. If you'd love to know more about this, go to laurapaynestanley.com/legacy.